Welcome to a Homegrown Family Podcast, where we grow the produce and the kids. Welcome back, everybody, to a Homegrown Family Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Metler. Today, we are talking about planting garlic, and I have yet another family member on board for this podcast. I've had many siblings, my parents, grandparents, and today I have my aunt, Michelle, who is married to my Uncle Richard, my dad's brother. So welcome aboard, Michelle. Thank you for joining us.
I'm excited to be here. Garlic is my favorite topic. Well, next to hot peppers. I don't know if you've had an episode on jalapenos yet, but I would like to sign up for that one.
All right. We got you on the docket for next year.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. So garlic, for me, I've never really tried a whole lot of garlic ever. You kind of heard in some other episodes, maybe I talked a little bit about it, but I tried it a couple years back. Michelle gave me a clove. I'm like, I'm going to try it. I put it in my raised garden bed, and I think it froze out. It must have started growing and just died. It was in a really shady area. And then this past year, our brother David gave me a couple cloves, and I put it outside the raised garden bed in kind of a shady area. I wasn't expecting a whole lot, but hey, I had what we called earlier episode a peanut-sized clove. So I had some success. So hopefully I'll learn a little bit more here from my aunt, Michelle. And hopefully you guys will learn a little bit also. But yeah, how did you get interested in garlic, Michelle, to start off with?
Well, when I was a little girl, my grandma had a big garden. My mom hated that stuff, and I didn't grow up with it at home at all. My grandma lived on a farm, and she had a huge garden, and I just loved being in the garden with my grandma. So I always thought that I would love to garden. So when we got married and we bought our first farm, I asked Rich if he would plow me a garden spot, and he got the neighbor to come over with a tractor. So, Michelle from the Twin Cities, who moved to a small town, now had like a tractor plowed up plot of land and 3 children under the age of 5. I don't recommend that.
Was that the place that had that blue house and you had that, was that foster kid or something come in? Or
yes,
that farmstead?
Yes. It wasn't blue. Our blue house was in town. It was originally white, and then we added on to it. I think it ended up to be brown. But yeah, that was, I did not like gardening then. And then we'd left and we moved to Rice, and so we were in town again. But then when we moved to Grandpa and Grandma's place and had a garden there, the kids were older and I had more time, and my grandma had passed away by then. And so I started gardening, and a really good friend of mine at work, Jim Krause, he's master gardener. Like he had pepper plants this year. I wish that this was a video podcast so I could show the picture. His pepper plants were up to my shoulders, and I'm 5'4". They were huge. Like, he's just a great gardener. So he was like, you should plant garlic. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. That sounds great because I love garlic, but I don't know anything about that. And he's like, you can't screw it up, Michelle. And so he just gave me some garlic that he had grown, and so he just gave me some heads of garlic. He told me it was hardneck garlic, and it was German porcelain. So that was the very first kind of garlic that I planted. And I just remember thinking, this doesn't look anything like what's in the grocery store, because grocery stores generally still soft neck, often from China. And this was, from my neighbor, and it was huge, like the size of my palm. It was just big. And we had put pigs in the garden to till it up and fertilize it, and I didn't know what I was doing. I planted it really late, according to what they tell you to, because the ground was partially frozen. And I remember I didn't know what I was doing. Rich, I don't know, everybody out in podcast land, if you know about the Metlers, they don't always listen to their wives. Fun fact. So he had said he tilled it up. It didn't seem to be as soft as I thought it would be in my head. So the ground was hard, and I remember, just putting these garlic cloves in the ground and picking up what I thought were like chunks of frozen dirt. Keep in mind, this is like really my first time gardening. I said to Rich, and I got back in, he's like, I don't know, you did not till that up very well. I know you didn't, because there were big chunks of dirt and they were so hard, and And I had to just like set them on top of the garlic cloves, and this isn't going to work. And he goes, Michelle, that was probably pig turds. And so, I'm telling you, you cannot screw this up. Like you really can't. I know I didn't plant them right that year, and they weren't obviously the best garlic I had, but I had garlic. And once I started that year, just because Jim gave me a couple heads of garlic one day, I've just been hooked on it because it's the first thing you plant because you plant it in the fall. It's the first thing that comes up and you look for it every year. Like, gardening season's starting when your garlic starts to stick up in the spring, and you can literally put like little turds of poop on top of it and it won't kill it. One year your grandpa was helping me. Well, he thought he was, and he was going to help me till the garden. Probably heard about Richard. And he accidentally tilled half of it up. And even the stuff that got cut up still sprouted.
Really? Wow. Resilient.
Yeah. So that's how I started.
So you've been doing it for, a number of years now. That's probably been a while back since you.
Yeah, that was 2008, I suppose.
Been a hot minute.
Yep.
You mentioned that it's planted in the fall.
Correct.
So what time frame in the fall are we talking about?
If you Google it, it tells you that you need to plant it a couple weeks after the first frost. I know Jim has already planted his because he gets excited. And the year I planted mine into the pig poop, it was right before deer hunting. So it was late. Generally, I plant mine in October. So like mid-October. And, in Minnesota, it really depends on the weather, right? Because you could have solid frozen ground in the middle of October, or you could be plowing in December. So, mid-October.
Yeah, that's kind of from what I've read and from what people tell me, mid-October is kind of like your general rule of thumb. I've heard that if you're like a pro, you'll start timing it out and you'll start looking at the calendar and being like, okay, well, it's not below 30 for the next 2 weeks, so I'm going to hold off about a week or so, until you get a little bit more consistent temperatures. But these plants, they do grow some roots, from what I understand, in the fall. So that way in the spring, they'll actually sprout. So you don't want to plant them too early to where they're actually going to sprout from the top and have that growth that will eventually surface. But you want to plant them, from what I understand, a little bit early before it freezes, so that way it can put a little bit of root establishment in the ground.
That is correct.
Yeah. See, I know something.
Yep.
So what do you like to use your garlic for? Because you do like a lot of canning, and this last episode we did talk about canning a lot. Is that kind of your main consumption of garlic, or do you just chop it up and throw it on fresh and eat it as is?
I use garlic in just about everything. So I put it in a lot of the food. I don't know how a person can make mashed potatoes without garlic in it. Like just potatoes. That seems weird. Just in the last few years, I just keep like an empty mason jar around, and I use that and I just smash the clove. And then once you smash it, the peeling comes right off. Plus it's broken, so when you put that in the water with your potatoes and cook it, so it cooks the garlic in the water with the potatoes, but then it seeps out all that garlic oil, which will get absorbed in your potatoes. So then I just drain it and then smash it all together like that. I put it in salad dressing. I always put it in any marinade I use. If I'm doing ground beef or any soup, just really anything. My daughter bought me this, it's like a round circle pottery thing, and it has little jagged things sticking up on it. So it really looks like a tiny little saucer for a cup. And then it has jagged, pointy things on the bottom of it, and you just like take your garlic clove and smush it around, and it just like shreds it down. And that is the coolest thing. It's really nice.
It's always kind of a challenge to try to, mince your garlic if you're just sitting on a cutting board cutting it with a knife. Like, it seems like it's always, at least the store-bought ones that are so small, it's a challenge sometimes.
Right. Well, Pampered Chef sells a garlic press. Highly recommend that. One of my favorite things, actually, this is not part of the TikTok pasta craze, but Rachel Ray, I feel like she started it. Rachel Ray has a recipe where you take a thing of cherry tomatoes, and then you take garlic cloves and do like what I said, you smash them, but you don't peel them. So you leave the peel on, you smash it, don't peel it, put it in with the tomatoes, and then olive oil, salt, and pepper, and roast that for like at 450 degrees for about 20 minutes or so till the tomatoes burst open. And then meanwhile, you cook your pasta to a little shy of al dente. So you want it to be pretty firm. You don't want it to be al dente, a little bit less than that. And then you drain your pasta, but keep part of the water. And then put your pasta back in the pan. Keep that reserved water on the side. And then you peel your garlic, like just, it's hot, so you have to be careful, but just get the garlic will just fall right out. But basically you have roasted garlic. Then you take all those tomatoes and all the garlic and put it in the pan with the hot pasta. Put about a cup of water in there and mix it all up, and then the pasta will finish cooking and suck up all that tomatoey, garlicky stuff. And then you throw in Parmesan cheese and either arugula or fresh spinach, and then mix it up. It's phenomenal.
It does sound pretty good. I'm going to go back and listen to this podcast a couple times to make sure I get all that.
You can Google it. It's a Rachel Ray recipe. It's pretty old. I used to make it for my family all the time. Super yummy.
I'll have you shoot me a link through email so I can post it on my show notes for everybody.
Okay. Lots and lots of things you can do with garlic. You just have to be careful what garlic you use. Found that out last year when I tried a new strain of very strong garlic.
That's the one thing about the hardneck garlics is that they're usually more aromatic and more flavorful than the store-bought and soft-neck garlics that people are probably used to.
For sure, yeah.
So, where do you get your garlic from? Like, what's your source of, like, if you're wanting to start out, where do you go?
I would definitely say you need to go to a reputable farmer, and the best place in Minnesota to find that is at the Garlic Festival in Hutchinson, who's put on by the Sustainable Farming Program, which is just great. They also do the Salsa Fest in Todd County. They sell garlic there too. So a lot of the sustainable farming events will have garlic growers there. But the Garlic Fest is in Hutchinson. It's the first weekend in August, I think, every year.
Yeah, in 2024, August 10th. Put it on your calendar, everybody.
10 out of 10. Like, it is so fun. And it's, if you're into organic farming or just sustainable living in general, you're going to find your people there. Like, it is not, there's some crafty kind of stuff there, but it's really sustainable farming heavy. Sometimes they'll even have University of Minnesota Extension people that will go teach classes that are free. Then that's like the first year I went to the Garlic Fest, many years ago. I sat in probably 3 or 4 classes and learned a lot about garlic there. Plus, there's tons and tons of different varieties. Like, who knew? I just knew there was hardneck and softneck, and that I liked hardneck better, and that was mine that grew the best in this weather here. But then when I went there are some vendors that they'll grow 10 varieties, and then they'll cut them into tiny little pieces so that you can try them all, and you think, well, these are probably all going to taste the same, and they don't. And
everybody's walking around with garlic bread.
Yes, yep, and garlic ice cream. You can get garlic ice cream there, it's actually really good, but I can't eat a lot of it. But
it's sold. I think I'm going to go next year. Sounds like a plan.
You should. We should all go as a family. It's really fun.
That would be fun. We mentioned that that's in August, and you're wanting to plant in October. So I know on the website you can just Google it, Upper Midwest Premium Garlic Directory, and it'll be a side link or tab from the Garlic Festival website type of thing, and you can see a bunch of growers in there that are listed, and you might be able to email one of them up yet. Maybe they have some garlic left over still. They're close by you, and you might be able to get some yet and still be able to plant it this fall. So it's not too late. You might be able to give it a try.
Yep. I just got mine from Jim today.
Nice.
To plant.
I got mine a couple weeks back. My brother David gave me 4 different varieties to try. And maybe we'll kind of turn the conversation to types of garlic or varieties that we've all tried. Michelle, we'll start off with kind of like what are your kind of go-tos? What are some maybe easy ones that you'd recommend for a person to start off with? Because I'm sure some are a little more challenging to grow than others, perhaps. So before you plant, you want to get your garlic cloves, right?
Yes. And then I think you want to know, what do you want to use the garlic for? So like when I first started, for years, I just had German porcelain garlic. That produces some huge cloves. So the bigger the clove you plant, the bigger the bulb you're going to get. So you don't want to plant like your tiniest cloves. You want to plant your biggest cloves. So you might only get 3 or 4 cloves in a German porcelain, and they're giant. But what that's great for is canning. So if you're making salsa and you're using fresh garlic that you have to peel and chop and all that stuff, it's really nice to have huge cloves. Now, if you're making dinner for 2, you maybe don't want to use 3 tablespoons of garlic in 1 clove because, right? So then you have like a half a clove and it'll dry out because you cut it open. And so kind of over the years, I was like hardcore German porcelain variety. And then when I started going to the Garlic Festival, we started trying some different ones. So my absolute favorite is Czesnak Red. It's a purple variety. It's still a hard neck. They have really pretty cloves because they have purple skin. So they're I don't know. I just get great joy out of just looking at them and peeling them and stuff because they're so pretty. The clove is still white, but the skin is purple. It has a milder taste, so it's not super strong. It's really good raw, and it doesn't lose its flavor when it cooks, if that makes sense. It has a little bit of more of a bite than, say, like a German porcelain. Is not quite as spicy. And I don't mean that in a spicy, like hot, but that garlic kind of burn, if that makes sense. So not last year, but the year before, we got this kind of garlic we had never heard of before. Jim and I always go to the Garlic Festival together. And it's called Larissa. I'm a little hesitant to put this on in a podcast because it's hard to find, and I don't want anyone taking my Larissa garlic at the Garlic Festival. There was only one vendor there who sold it, and he told us he was the only one in Minnesota who had it, and that he sold primarily to restaurants. And so, of course, I had to buy it, right? Like, I'm in. I've never heard of this, and if professional chefs are loving this garlic, I need to try it. And I remember cutting it open and, smashing it and thinking, well, this is no Czesnak Red. I can hardly smell it. I don't know what all the fuss is about this garlic. And then I put it in the pan and cooked it. And when you heat that garlic up, holy moly, it is so garlicky. I mean, it's delicious, but Jim and I still make jokes about what happened to the both of us last year at Thanksgiving. We both did the same thing. We put as much garlic as we normally would in our potatoes. And then we had these super garlicky mashed potatoes. You can't undo it. I thought it was delicious, but everyone's like, whoa, it's a little garlicky. I'm like, I'm so sorry, but this garlic, I don't know how to portion it out, but it's really good. If you want to cook, you just have to be careful. I think that's why I still love the Czesnak Red. The cloves are decent size. They're big. They're not too big. They're pretty. They grow really nice. You get a lot of cloves in a bulb. They're super versatile. I really like it.
Okay. Yeah, so you already mentioned 2 of the ones that David's given me. The Czesnak Red and then the German porcelain. And then the other 2 cultivars, I don't know, I guess maybe the Music. Have you ever heard of that one?
Oh, Music. Oh, yeah, I used to grow Music. Yeah, that's huge. You get a huge clove of Music garlic. It's a German porcelain variety, and it's really big. Well, that's a little one.
Yeah, well, you guys can't see it, but my brother David didn't necessarily give me the largest cloves, I don't think. So Michelle was saying the larger that you plant them when you start, the bigger they're going to be, and I'm going to have to harass him a little bit and tell him to give me the big ones. But the other one is a Northern White. Does that sound right?
I've
I think
heard of that, but I've never grown it. Is that a soft neck?
it might be. I thought it was all hard neck stuff, but
Could be.
not entirely sure. But so it sounds like if you're a beginner, the German porcelain and the Chinook red might be a good combination to do. They're large, they're big, they're versatile. I know anytime I start growing something, you want it to be big and beautiful, right? So
Right.
maybe try that. Yeah, what's your favorite one now after several years of growing garlic?
I can't stop loving chestnut red. It's the best. And I just feel like Jim is the professional gardener in my life, and he agrees. It is such a great garlic, and when we go to the garlic festival, we get there before 10 a.m. so that we can go right to the vendors. Like, I like Big Stone garlic, and that's usually where we go and get our garlic.
So we kind of talked a little bit about the prepping or the reasons why you might want to grow garlic, and now you got to get your garlic, and then after that you got to plant it, right? So I guess Michelle, kind of start from the beginning, from the type of site that you want to grow your garlic to spacing and garden preparation and things like that. Yeah, what do y'all recommend or do or for that process?
Well, after what happened to you, I don't recommend a raised bed. I think that it freezes. That's what I think. It doesn't, that there's not enough insulation probably. And they don't like to be wet, like real wet. Like Jim said, he goes, this is one of the only years in my life. And, Jim is 10 years older than me, that he's actually watered his garlic. Generally, if you have a normal rain season, you don't want to water your garlic because it doesn't need it. It doesn't want to be wet. So you want to be decently draining. You don't want it to be sand, obviously, because it needs lots of nutrients. You want to till in a lot of compost, or like we always put animals in our garden so that they can fertilize it and kind of till it up, usually pigs. If you have the ability to do that, that is a great way to fertilize your garden. And clean up the old stuff, right? We always put pigs. Sometimes we borrow pigs from your dad when we don't have a phone. Yeah, we haul them over here and put them in. But you want to till it up. You should be able to just shove the garlic clove in. Like, that's how Jim and I do it. He taught me how to do it. You just hold the garlic clove in your fingers, with the pointy side will be going up, right? So the part where the root was, you need to go down, and so the pointy side up. And I just hold it, and then I push it down until it gets past my second knuckle in the dirt. And I just push it in, push it in, push it in. If the ground isn't tilled up as well as I'd like, that happens to me sometimes, then I just kind of dig a little trench, and then when I put the dirt over it, I make sure that I, kind of squish it enough so that the clumps fall apart.
I'd agree with basically all of that. I think I recently listened to a podcast on garlic too to kind of prep myself for some of this, but saying a lot of the same things as far as having something, planting in an area that's well drained, where water's not going to pool, but perhaps it does need moisture, but not like stagnant moisture. It's got to be able to filtrate through the soil. Pretty heavy nutrient type of plant, and so you want to have an adequate amount of nutrients, and that'll kind of lead into a future podcast in the next couple of weeks where I'm talking about soil sampling and nutrients and things like that. We'll get more into that. And then also, composting, blood meals, all good stuff to add into that depending on what type of nutrient you need. And so cultivating, preparing a seed bed, you want something soft, to be able to just kind of hand put stuff in, make it easy on yourself. And Michelle kind of described, depth that's like 1 to 2 inches, maybe depending on your size of your hands, but which from what I've heard, some people say, oh yeah, I stick her in there, 3-4 inches, and other people are like, I planned it just to where I can see the tip of the garlic out of the soil. So I'm like, does it matter too much? I mean, it kind of depends on how soft your soil is. Because if you get it really, really soft, you put it 3-4 inches deep, it's going to settle down to about 2 inches. So I think Michelle's got it right and has a good 2-inch depth. It's probably pretty good from what I'm reading and understanding.
You also need to cover it. Then we usually use leaves. and put a big thick layer of leaves over for the winter. So that's what we do. And I generally don't remove my leaves. I'll pull them back to see if it's sprouted yet. And I know Jim doesn't remove his either because garlic plants do not like to compete with weeds. So if you keep that like 2 inches, 3 inches of leaves or, some sort of compost on top, that holds the moisture in too, which then, you don't need to water it as much. And it keeps the weeds out of there. So you really need to weed it because they do not like to compete.
Grass clippings will also provide a little bit of nitrogen, so if you're cutting up your grass late in the fall, you might get enough to be able to put a little layer in there. Other people might use straw. One of the cons of straw is that you can sometimes get seed that's left over from the combine and everything, and then next thing you know, Michelle mentioned you don't want to compete with weeds. Well, you don't want to compete with volunteer oats or volunteer wheat either, coming from the straw. So that's potentially problematic with the straw, depending on, your source perhaps. But
another thing I learned from the Minnesota Extension Service, when I first started going to the Garlic Festival, they had a big problem with, it's like a mold or a mildew or something that will get on it. It gets in the soil and then it will turn your garlic to like liquid. It just eats your garlic away, and it'll live in the soil and you can't really kill it. So you're supposed to rotate your garlic crop and not plant it in the same place all the time. They recommend it every 4 years. So that's what Jim and I do is we put it because you don't want to plant it in the middle of your garden, right? Because you're planting it in the fall. And so we're going to till around it. I make sure after what Grandpa did to it that one year, I put big stakes all the way around it. Like flags, like this is my garlic. So I put it in a different corner, right? You have 4 corners. You're supposed to rotate it, not put it in there for 4 years. So I just put it in a different corner every year. So I just keep going around the outside corners of my garden. And the nice thing about putting in the corner is it's easy to kind of quarantine that off from someone who's trying to be helpful till your garden up.
The other part about planting, I guess, is how far apart do you plant your garlic? Because you mentioned, they can grow palm size. I mean, you want to leave some good spacing between these cultivars and stuff.
This is a very scientific way. I take my hand, I put my whole hand out. I don't have a very big hand either. And I plant my hands a hand apart. So the garlic cloves in the middle of my palm, and then I kind of just space it out that way. So it's, probably 3 inches or so apart.
It's probably more than that.
Yeah, I mean, they can actually be pretty close together. I usually do like 2 rows fairly close together, and then a big an open space, and then another 2 rows close together. Just in case I do have to weed, because you want to be able to easily reach in there and weed. Mm-hmm. Super important. I'm not a big fan of weeding all the time, and, other plants, when they start to get bigger, can compete okay with a few weeds here and there, but I really try to keep my garlic weeded well. So I think about that. So it depends on, can you fit between the rows? How far in can you reach? So it's just something to think about, I think. Yeah. At least I do.
Yeah, I've heard anything from 5 inches apart to up to maybe 8, and kind of like an 8 by 8 inch grid. Like I said, if you can't get in between stuff, it makes it a little more difficult. That's why I like my raised garden bed, but I don't know. I'm going to try doing it in there again, and I hope it works out. Yeah. But I don't know where else to put it. I don't have any other space, so that's going to be my thing again. I'm going to try doing I'm not sure what I'm going to do differently, but you mentioned the mulch and things, and I remember this podcast I just listened to that sometimes they'll bury it, kind of where it's just showing just a little bit of the surface. Then they'll put 2 inches of compost on top and then put their mulch. So then their compost basically, if compost is done right and it's fully mature, all the weed seeds should basically be gone. And so then you kind of end in this nice little nutrient-rich compost that'll hopefully be, as the winter snow up here in upper Midwest kind of moves through the soil profile in the spring, it's kind of carrying a lot of that nutrients downwards to where those cloves are at, and then has hopefully it's what they call a sterile seed bed, so there's no weeds growing through it or anything. So might be an option too to try.
Yeah.
You gotta be careful though. If you get it too fresh, it could be a lot of weed seeds in there. So.
Yep. If you don't have weeds to pull, what do you do in the summer?
Yeah, I could think of a lot of things to do. So yeah, we talked about where to get your garlic. Maybe some different cultivars to look at, trying. Talked about how to prepare your soil bed, and then how to plant your garlic. Are we missing anything, Michelle? Is there something other kind of tips of the trade?
Very important. Can we talk about garlic scapes? Have you had a garlic scape? Have you eaten one?
I had a little segment with David earlier this year where we talked about a little bit about garlic scapes, and because we talked about how had a little episode on harvesting garlic, and I talked about that scaping part prior to that. But
yeah. So you have to make sure you cut them off because they will compete with the garlic, and then you should definitely eat them.
Yeah, I put them on my mashed potatoes. It was great.
Oh my gosh, they're amazing. Eggs or garlic scape pesto. Google that. That is amazing. So good.
I did actually make a lot of basil pesto this past year, but I didn't think about throwing my scapes in it. But I do put garlic in it, but it's this store-bought and stuff, so I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, yeah. I got one more question here for Michelle. So, in my situation, I planted it in a spot in the raised garden bed that was pre-shaded, and so it didn't ever thaw out real quickly. I guess part of the reason it died off. So I'm going to try planting it in the warmest, hottest spot in the garden bed, so that way hopefully snow will melt and things will just start coming out, right? But this last year I also took one clove of garlic that was sitting on my counter from the store, and I threw it in the early spring. Do you recommend planting garlic in the spring? Or what would you anticipate would happen if you planted it in the spring?
People do plant it in the spring. I think your mom did that one year. It does grow. It just doesn't get as big.
Garlic does require a vernalization period, like a cool period before it grows. So if you can somehow maybe store them in the fridge, would that be enough to get them to come up in the spring then?
They will sprout in your fridge if you leave them in there long. So you maybe could plant them. I don't know. I've never tried it. I think you're going to be lucky this year because it sounds like it's supposed to be warmer. At least that's what they're predicting. So, if we don't have, 30 below zero for a week straight, that might help. If you super mulch it so that it maybe doesn't freeze so hard, and then you probably should take the mulch off. You could always put it back on after it sprouts, but so that your ground warms up from the sun. Like garlic likes a lot of sun. It wants to be warm in the summer. It doesn't want to be cool and damp and yucky. It likes that heat in the sun. So you want the ground to thaw out. So if you're not, like sometimes when my garlic would not thaw out in the spring, I'm going to uncover it for a little bit and then cover it back up.
Yeah, I'll give it another shot. I only have a couple cloves, so if it ends up dying, you always plant something else there later. So that's one good thing, I guess, is that if it doesn't come up right away, you can always go put some carrots in or something and still get a crop. So.
Yep, and hopefully I got contaminated soil last year, which ruined my garden. But guess what? My garlic still grew. Just saying, I planted that in the fall, so I didn't put the new dirt in until after, so that it was kind of around it. And so it didn't really affect my garlic a whole lot. So I will always have extra garlic for you if you need it.
Perfect. Then on that note, then I guess we'll have a good winter and hope that the garlic will grow well. And I guess stay tuned for the springtime here and see if it works out. If you have any other questions, you can email me at homegrownfam@gmail.com. If you have any questions for Michelle in terms of garlic or anything, it's anything. If we get enough questions, maybe we'll have her back on as a guest if you enjoyed her company. She also is really good at making some salsas and stuff. So if you have any just general questions for her, I'd love to have her back. Give me a reason to have her back. So also, I'll be posting some of those links to different recipes that you mentioned and some of those different websites in the show notes. You just check those out. Also, I'll show a picture on my Instagram account at A Homegrown Fam with the chestnut red and the German porcelain side by side, so you can kind of see that different purple color, right, which is kind of cool. So other than that, thank you, Michelle, for joining us today on this lovely episode number 20. It feels like it's been a long time already, but
Yep. Happy planting.
All right, thanks everybody.